கடலெழும் எழிலியால் பொழிதரு நீர்தான் கடல்நிலை அடைவரை தடைceyi ணillā duḍaluyi உனில் எழும் முன்னையுறு வரையில் ஒரு பல வழிகளில் luṟaliṉu நில்லாது இடைவெளி yalaiyiṉu nilaiyilai puḻḷuk திடம் நிலம் maladilai varuvaṛi செல்ல kaḍaṉuyir varuvaṛi seṉṯṛிḍa viṉpak kaḍaluṉai மறுவிடும் அருணபுதரனே.
Today I'll be discussing the 8th and final verse of Arunachala Aṣṭakam. There is a continuity of ideas between one verse and the next, so I'll just go back a couple of verses to recapitulate on what Bhagavan had already said. In the 6th verse, Bhagavan describes, well, he first says there is only one substance, you, the heart, the light of awareness. So that is, here means Arunachala. Arunachala is the heart, the light of awareness, and that is the one real substance. So nothing else actually exists. Whatever seems to exist is nothing other than that, is the implication. And then he says, in you exists an extraordinary power which is not other than you. That extraordinary power, Adiseya Shakti, that is Maya, or in the 4th paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan explains it as the mind. The mind is nothing but that power of Maya. And then he says that from that power, in other words, from the mind, series of shadowy thoughts spinning in the worlds of destiny are seen on the mirror of the mind light as shadowy world pictures, both inside and outside. Outside via the senses, such as the eye, like shadow pictures that stand out, like a shadow picture that stands out or is projected by a lens. So Bhagavan is using here the cinema analogy. So, but, and then he says in the final sentence, Hill of Grace, let them cease or let them go, and they do not exist at all apart from you. So all that is seen is nothing but thoughts, and it's actually the true substance behind it all, what appears as all these thoughts, these perceptions, and that constitute the world, both the external world, the seemingly physical world, and the seemingly internal world of our own mind, all are nothing but thoughts. Thoughts, Bhagavan uses thoughts in a very broad sense to mean any mental phenomena. So all these are just mental phenomena. Perceptions are mental phenomena, and the world is nothing but perception, 5 types of sense perception, as he says in verse 6 of Ulladu. So that's what he says in verse 6. So basically he's saying that everything, all phenomena are nothing but thoughts. The whole world is nothing but thoughts. It's thoughts that are seen as all these things. So what is the root of how to get rid of thoughts? In order to get rid of thoughts, we obviously need to get rid of the root of all thoughts. And as he often said, the root of all thoughts is ego, the first thought, the thought called I. So that's what he refers to in the first sentence of the 7th verse. He says, if a thought called I does not exist, even one other thought or thing will not exist. So without ego, nothing else exists. So in order to get rid of all these appearances, all this vast illusion, all we need to do is to get rid of the root of it, get rid of the ego. Why is ego the root of it? Because it is ego that perceives all this. In the absence of ego, nothing is perceived, so nothing other than pure awareness exists. So in order to get rid of ego, as Bhagavan often explained, the nature of ego is such that well, as he says in the 25th verse of Ulladu, Urupatri, that grasping form, it comes into existence. Urupatri, grasping form, it stands. Urupatri undu mikaongam, grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes. It here means the ego, which he describes in that verse as Uruvatrapeya Hande, the formless phantom ego. So ego is formless because it has no form of its own. It cannot come into existence or stand or flourish without grasping forms. Forms means phenomena, anything other than itself. So the first form of body the ego grasps is a body, which it takes to be itself. And then through the five senses of the body, it perceives so many other forms. So by perceiving forms, by perceiving phenomena, ego flourishes. But he says, Tedinalotum pidicum, if sought, it takes flight. That is, so long as ego's attention is turned towards things other than itself, it flourishes. But when it turns its attention back towards itself, it subsides and disappears. That's what he means by when sought, it takes flight. So this is the nature of the ego. The nature of the ego is such that it flourishes, it flourishes, it feeds and nourishes itself by attending to things other than itself. If it attends to itself, because it is unreal, it dissolves back into its source. Because it is formless, it seems to exist only when it grasps forms. If it tries to grasp itself, it dissolves and disappears. So that's what he refers to in the next sentence of verse 7 of Aruṇācala Aṣṭakam. Until then, if other thoughts arise, merge back within by investigating thus. To whom has it appeared? To me. What is the place from which I rose? So in other words, we turn our attention back. If ego turns its attention back towards itself, it will merge back within. And then he says, sinking thereby within, if one reaches the heart throne, one will be the very emperor seated under the shade of a single umbrella. That's a metaphorical way of saying, referring to God as the supreme Lord of the universe, of this and every other world. So one will. So if one reaches the heart and merges within, one will become that God. That means the supreme, the ultimate reality, which is nothing but our own real nature. And then he says the dream, implying the dream of duality, which consists of pairs of opposites, such as inside and outside, the two karmas, that means good and bad actions, birth and death, happiness and misery, darkness and light will then not exist. So all dualities appear only because we rise as ego. Only in the view of ego there is duality. So all this duality is just a dream, and the dreamer is ego. Without the dreamer there's no dream. And then he concludes by saying, what will exist, or well, he doesn't actually say what will exist, but it's implied, what will exist is only the infinite light of grace called Arunachala, which dances motionlessly in the court of the heart. So that pure awareness which is always shining in our heart as I, that is Arunachala, and that alone is real, so that alone will exist when ego ceases to exist. Because when ego ceases to exist, all its dreams come to an end. So Bhagavan has brought us up to the ultimate state. But at present we seem to be far from that state. Now, of course we are never far from it because it's our real nature. But though it may seem very, because of our desires and attachments, it seems difficult for us to turn within, though Bhagavan says actually there's nothing easier than this. But in this last verse, Bhagavan gives us an assurance that ultimately we all have to return to our source, to the place from which we came. he gives a couple of analogies here. In the first sentence he says, kaḍaleṛu meṛiliyāṭ poṛidaru nīrdāṉ kaḍaṉilai yaḍaivarai taḍaiceyi nillā. That means water showered by the clouds which rise from the ocean will not stop, even if it's obstructed, until it reaches its ocean abode. That is, whatever, when water is evaporated from the ocean, it becomes clouds. From the clouds it rains down on the earth. If it rains on a mountain, for example, it'll flow down the side of a mountain. It may get obstructed in the way. It may get caught in lakes or in reservoirs. It may even get evaporated again, but again the same cycle. It will continue. As soon as it falls as rain, it cannot stop until it reaches the ocean. So it'll flow and it'll be obstructed on the way, but it'll continue flowing. Eventually it has to reach, it cannot rest, it cannot keep still until it reaches the ocean. It may temporarily rest in a lake or something, but that's not a stable state. As soon as it has a chance to break free, it goes down to the lowest point, to the ocean. Then in the next line he says, duḍaluyi ruṉileṛu varáyiyi luṟupala vaṛigaḻi luṛaliṉu nillā. That means likewise, likewise is not there, it's implied. The embodied soul which rises from you will not stop, even though it wanders along many paths that it encounters, until it reaches you. So it is the nature of ego, the soul, to the soul that always binds itself to a body. That's why he calls it duḍaluyi, the embodied soul. It's the where does it come from? It comes from you. You here means Arunachala, which, as he said in the earlier verses, for example in verse 6, is nothing but the heart, the light of awareness, the one real substance. So that's our own fundamental awareness of our own existence. I am. That is the source from. That is Arunachala, and that is the source from which we rise as ego. Ego is the false awareness. I am this person. I am this body. So it will. Having risen as ego, we cannot stop until we return to our source, until we return to Arunachala, is the implication of that sentence. Then in the next sentence he gives another analogy. Though it, he says, diḍaveļi yalaiyiṉu nilaiyilai puļļuk. That means, though it wanders in the vast sky, for a bird there is no place of rest. That means in the sky, it cannot rest in the sky. So it implies there's no place of rest there in the sky. Nillā except the earth, there is no place. That means there's no place for it to rest. It implies place of rest. Then in the next sentence he says, varuvaṛi sellak. That means kaḍaṉ means it means duty or obligation, in the sense of like the bird flying in the sky. It is obliged to eventually return to earth. It can't stay in the sky forever. So in that sense, it's an obligation. It's not. It's what we have to do. What must eventually be done. What it must do, kaḍaṉ, varuvaṛi sellak, to go back the way it came. So Bhagavan often used to say this. go the way you came. What he meant by go the way you came is we rose from our own real nature, our own self, the pure awareness. So just as we rose from there, we have to go back there. And the only way to go back is to go the way we came. We rose by grasping form. By leaving form, we have to return there. In other words, by grasping ourselves, we have to return. That's what Bhagavan meant, go the way you came. And so that is all an analogy. That is, the bird wanders about in though it wanders about in the sky, for a bird there's no place of rest. Except the earth, there's no place. What it must do is go back the way it came. It has to. It has to go back the way it came. There's no option for it other than that. Then in the final sentence he says, we're varuvaṛi seṉṯṛiḍa. That means when the soul goes back the way it came, imba kaḍaluṉai maruvidam. It will merge in you the ocean of happiness. Arunachala. Arunachala means Aruna mountain, Arunachala. So the there's no word likewise here, but it's implied because he's just given an analogy. Likewise, Aruna mountain, he's addressing Arunachala. When the soul goes back the way it came, it will merge in you the ocean of happiness. Throughout Bhagavan's teachings, he's emphasizing happiness. When he rewrote the questions and answers recorded by Śrī Aruṇācala as an essay, to make the essay form of Nāṇa, he wrote one paragraph which wasn't part of the original question and answers, in which he talked about happiness. But every living being is seeking happiness without misery. What we all want is happiness without misery. That paragraph is actually a condensation of the introduction of the first sentence of the introduction to that he wrote for his translation of Vivekananda. So in every place possible, Bhagavan is stressing the importance of happiness. And in Anma Vidya, every verse, the final sentence, he talks about happiness. In the final sentence or clause, he refers to happiness. So Bhagavan's teachings are all about happiness. If you want, in a nutshell, what Bhagavan's teachings are, it is be happy. But how to be happy? Happiness is our own real nature. So in order to be truly happy, in order to experience the infinite and eternal happiness that we really are, we have to go back the way we came. That is, instead of turning outwards, we've got to turn back within. So by looking outwards, we've risen. By looking back within, we will subside back within. So we have to go back the way we came. Where are we going to? We're going back to our real nature, back to ourself. And what are we? We are infinite happiness. As he describes it here, imba kadal, the ocean of happiness. That is our real nature, and that is the real nature of Arunachala, because Arunachala is nothing but our own real nature. So our own real nature is Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat means what is, Ulladu. It's what actually exists. Only that actually exists. It is Chit, it is pure awareness, and it is Ananda. It is infinite happiness. So that is our real nature, and that is Arunachala, because Arunachala is nothing but our own self. Arunachala means, you can say God or whatever, God or Guru or whatever you like. Bhagavan often used to say God, Guru and self are not are one and the same thing. That is, it's our own real nature that appears outwardly as God, and for us to worship and ask for this and that, to fulfill all our desires. When we finally get tired of when we understand that there's no, but however many desires are fulfilled, we are never satisfied. When we finally want to surrender ourselves completely to God, understanding that unsatisfactory nature of existence as an embodied soul, we have to we want to surrender ourselves to God. Then God appears in the form of Guru to say, I am nothing, I am not something outside of you, I'm not something distant, I am yourself. What if you want to find me, turn within. You can't find me outside in name and form. That is the function of Guru is always to turn our attention within. That's why that's the meaning of the Mahavakyas of the Upanishads, like Tattvamasi. Tat there means Brahman or God. In the early stages of the path of bhakti, we take God to be something other than ourselves. But Guru comes to say, God is nothing, you yourself are God. There's no God other than yourself. That is, God is your real nature. So in order to know God, you need to know yourself. So that's what Bhagavan's teachings are all about. And only when we know ourselves will we experience the infinite happiness that is our real nature. So in this verse, Bhagavan is giving us an assurance. Just like the waters evaporate from the ocean, cannot rest until they return to the ocean, and like a bird flying around in the sky cannot rest until it returns to earth, it has to go back the way it came. Likewise, we have to return to the place from which we came. The place from which we came is pure awareness, our own real nature. So in order to return there, we have to turn back within. So this is, in this verse, Bhagavan assures us, eventually this will happen. But how long will it take? It all depends on how willing we are to surrender ourselves. Because surrender ourselves, when we talk of self-surrender, we're talking about surrendering ego. It's not what we can't surrender what we actually are. We can only surrender what we seem to be. So what we seem to be now is this ego, this false awareness, I am this body. So this is what we need to surrender. And only when we are willing to surrender this will we return the way we came and merge back into Arunachala, the infinite ocean of happiness. In this final sentence, the clause that I translated as "it will merge in you" is "une maruvidam." Maruvu is a verb, but it doesn't. It implies in this context merge, but what it actually means, it will combine, it will join, it will embrace, it will. In effect, it means it will become you. It will become you. So when we turn back within to see what we actually are, what will remain is only the pure awareness that we actually are. So we who have now risen as ego will in effect become pure awareness. Of course there's no becoming because we're always that, but when we cease to mistake ourselves to be the body or anybody, and when we merge back into the pure awareness from which we arose, we in effect that's why it is said the knower of Brahman becomes Brahman. What actually knows Brahman is only Brahman. Brahman here means our real nature, Arunachala. People talk about a self-realized person as if we as a person can realize ourselves. So long as we take ourselves to be a person, we are not self-realized. When we are self-realized, we are no longer a person, because when we know what we actually are, we cease to be this ego or this person. We remain as we really are, which is Brahman, which is Arunachala, right? One infinite Satchidananda, pure being, existence, awareness and happiness. So that is that's what Bhagavan's teachings are all about. And in this verse, Bhagavan assures us, eventually you have to go back the way you came. So since we eventually have to go back there, why delay? Why not make effort to return there now itself? That is the implication of this verse. So it's both an assurance and goading us to do as he implies in this verse, go back the way we came. How to go back the way we came? He explained in a previous sentence that when we as ego investigate ourselves, when we investigate who am I, what is the source from which I've risen, we will merge back there. So that is the way to go back the way we came. So it's by self-investigation and self-surrender. But going back the way we came means following the path of self-investigation and self-surrender. Because then that is the only means by which we can return to the source from which we rose. We rose by looking outwards, we have to return by looking inwards.